Peter Gleeson, editor of the Sunday Mail. Thank you for joining me. And we've been talking about how journalism has changed. Now, we started touching on what I'd call, in summary, philosophy of journalism. So, leaving the word journalism aside, you've got reporting and you've got commentating. Are they separate roles, or does every journalist have both roles? You mentioned a couple of names, and there's different personalities that we can think of. Feel free to name them, I don't mind. But how is that changing? And because you hear Trump talking about it non-stop, and I talk about it non-stop. You know, I want people to watch my show because I think they're going to get a different perspective than they're going to get from the mainstream media. And, you know, and I freely admit it. I've got a bias, I've got a worldview, but now let's talk about it with facts and evidence, putting that aside.
All right, so here's the deal. So reporters, young reporters in particular, are paid to write stories, and they will pull together news stories, and they will adhere to all the golden rules of journalism, and that is fairness, accuracy, and making sure that all the key stakeholders get their say. Now that is news, and those are news stories, and you know, if you flick through any newspaper, you will see copious amounts of news stories where the code of ethics, where the model, the template for journalism is adhered to, and it's upheld by the chief of staff, the sub-editors, and the editors, and the editor. Very important. And there is, you know, the Press Council and Media Watch. They will always hold you to account if you bugger that up. Then you have analysis and commentary, and these are the people who are paid to have an opinion. And in our company, you're talking about people like Miranda Devine, Andrew Bolt, David Pemberthy, Peter Credlin. These are people who are the best in their class. They are the best commentators. We have sport guys like Robert Craddock, Phil Rothfield, Paul Kent, who are paid to have an opinion. Invariably, they've come through the ranks and they've proven themselves to be newsbreakers, very good at what they do, and they're at the point where people actually like to know what they are thinking, and they're prepared to pay for what they're thinking. We have journos in Melbourne who Mark Robinson and the young bloke Michael Warner, who when they write opinion pieces, they drive subscriptions to our online editions. So people are prepared to pay for premium content. They're prepared to pay for people who have got an opinion, and that's why you see the emergence of a network like Sky News. Sky News is 5 minutes at news on the hour, which is hard news and tells you what's going on, and the other 55 minutes in that hour is opinion.
Commentary, yeah.
Commentary. And people, and it's no coincidence that the best commentators in the country, Alan Jones, Paul Murray, Andrew Bolt, Miranda, you know, all those people who Credlin, Keneally, Van Osland, they are people who the average person is prepared to pay money for a subscription to listen to these people because they are the best in their field. So people talk about, and I know Trump talks about this all the time, you know, that there's a blurring between news and commentary. There's no blurring between news and commentary. News is news, and we uphold all the traditions that are attached to news, and stories run on the front page and on page 3 and 5 and 7 and 9, and then you get to the commentary section, and that is open slather. That's where people have their opinion. When I write an editorial, I'm the editor. I write my opinion. Now, last weekend, I got stuck into Malcolm Turnbull because he's been a bit of a disappointment. The Premier took the long handle to him. You know, described him as arrogant and disrespectful and gutless. And in many respects, she probably had a point because he didn't show her any respect in relation to a couple of big announcements that had happened after Cyclone Debbie. I mean, it's pretty common courtesy to include the Premier in any announcements in relation to cleanups and so forth. So she gave him a crack. Now, that's news.
Yep.
I then write an editorial about it saying, I agree with her. That's my opinion. I'm the editor. I get to write the editorial. But, you know, there is no blurring between news and commentary. There is a distinction, and everybody knows the distinction.
So the phenomenon may be somewhat more pronounced in America, where you basically have CNN versus Fox.
Correct.
And you'll get an entirely different opinion of what's going on in the world.
Correct.
And how it's going on.
Sure.
And people tend to watch one and not both.
Correct.
Whichever one they already agree with, for the large part. So that, how does that rational fit with what you've just said? Because it seems like even in the reporting of the facts, there's a whole bent on it which can go left or right as your political.
I think America is an example where you know, the big cable news channels, they take a particular line. Now, I've got no doubt that Fox immeasurably helped Donald Trump get elected to be president. Absolutely no doubt. His accessibility, he basically got his platform out on Fox. He wouldn't appear on CNN because he knows that he might get carved up. He's going to be a lot more. There's going to be a lot more accountability. So
those other channels didn't not cover him and everything he said. They just covered it negatively.
Yeah.
So I think they gave him his platform out. In fact, one of the things that we could compare it to is Hanson here in Queensland and Australia. The media have given her the oxygen she's thrived on. The media's hate for her has given her the oxygen she's thrived on. She wouldn't be a factor if she didn't get a front page.
Agreed. But, you know, Pauline Hanson has developed a very, very strong following, particularly in Queensland. Many of the people who vote for Pauline Hanson read the Sunday Mail. I'm not going to just, stop Pauline Hanson from appearing in my newspaper because I don't agree with what she says. I mean, we do live in a democracy. She is entitled to her say. I disagree with a lot of what Pauline Hanson says. In fact, I've expressed that many occasions in the Sunday Mail. I think a lot of her stuff, I mean, you know, she went completely off the reservation recently before the WA election on anti-vaccination, and, you know, she lied about GST allocations to a Perth radio station, and she got caught out. And you know, it definitely affected her vote in WA. Will it affect her vote in Queensland? Well, time will tell. We're headed for an election sometime this year, and I still think she's tracking quite well in Queensland. But I think it's incumbent upon, newspapers, particularly in a democracy, to report all the news. You know, whether you agree with it or you don't agree with it. You know, that's the difference between news and commentary. We write what she says and her platforms and her policies, and then we have the option to be critical of them if we want to be in our commentary pages. And you'll often see people like Terry Sweetman and David Pemberthy and Lauren Martin-Jones and Credlin be critical of Hanson because, you know, often what she says is probably not good policy.
And are there just too many minor parties going on to give them all an equal amount of coverage? For example, what's your policy on X?
Sure. Yeah, definitely. I mean, you know, I think Australia has a problem federally with the Commonwealth, and I know Tony Abbott was only talking about this recently. I think the dysfunctionality within the Senate and the crossbenchers and the inability for government to get legislation through, all this horse trading. I mean, Hinch, he flips, he flops, he flips, Xenophon, what an
Do you think our democracy corrects itself? Or do you think it needs more tinkering to eliminate some of these fly-by-nighters?
Personally, I think it needs tinkering. I mean, I don't think it corrects itself. I think we've been held hostage by, a recalcitrant Senate for some time. I think, Paul Keating was right when he referred to the Senate as unrepresentative swill. I think there are...
You can always trust Paul for some colour.
I think we definitely should have a look at it. I mean, it's difficult for any incumbent government. What would you change? Well, I just think that the emergence of these smaller parties and smaller political forces is counterproductive to getting things done in this country. So what would I change? I'd change the formula around being elected. I think that, you know, and you know, it's a complex area, and I don't profess to know all the answers today, but I think we need to have a really good look at how
You'd like
we
to
do
see
this.
some changes.
I'd like to see some changes. And I mean, you know, people would say, oh yeah, but that's democracy, that's the system we have. But I just don't think it's working right now.
Okay, so we can't cover all the minor parties' views on all the issues, or even perhaps the major ones. What role, bringing it back to a journalist's role in politics, where do you think the balance is between speculation and education? Because all the speculation in America was completely wrong. And perhaps even in the recent Perth election, Western Australian elections, there was a lot of speculation that Pauline Hanson would do a lot better.
Yeah.
And then the reporting was she did terribly, and then the final wash-up ends up that maybe she didn't do as bad as was reported.
I think that comes back to the polls, doesn't it? You know, polling is massive in this country. We all look to polls to give us a guide as to who's doing what. We saw a poll last weekend which showed that Anastasia Palaszczuk was doing quite well. She got a spike after her performance during the cyclone. I think polling is an interesting area. I think we really pump up polling, and prime ministers are changed because of polling. I mean, the reason that Tony Abbott was dumped by his party for Malcolm Turnbull was because Turnbull mounted the argument that there'd been 32 consecutive news polls which showed that Abbott was losing and that he wasn't getting traction and his economic blueprint was no good, and now we're finding that Turnbull's going through a similar polling pattern. Exactly. So I think it comes back to polling, but clearly in the United States there was an issue. No one foresaw the way in which that election sort of worked itself out. And I think Trump, I think there is an argument that some Trump and Hanson supporters don't actually fess up to pollsters. You know, I don't know why, but I think clearly because if the pollsters had got it right in the US election, Clinton would be president.
Yeah, that's right. Let's talk about upcoming elections in state elections and in the Australian federal landscape in our next and final segment.
Sure.
Thanks for watching. If you really enjoyed that video, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel. Have a look at this great video next, and check out the website for even more interesting articles and episodes later.